Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Hey, Caroline, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Really good. Really good. I can't believe we're already at the end of June here, and yeah, there's so much going on right now in the EPL world of EPL. We just wrapped up a couple forward-thinking speaker series events. Our summer reading clubs for kids and adults has launched, and there's always so much going on at EPL.
Yeah, it's an exciting time of year for sure.
Yeah, and when we talk about like so much going on at EPL, a lot of times too, I don't think a lot of people realize sometimes how much different, either not just events, but really services as well, and different online resources that EPL has, especially, when we talk about digital public spaces. So, when we talk about digital public spaces, the one service that we've talked about a lot on the show has been Capital City Records. But we do have another digital space that we're really excited to kind of highlight today and chat about is Voices of the Land, which is something which is a digital public space that supports communities to share, create, and discover and celebrate Indigenous content online. So, Caroline, I'm really excited to be chatting all about this one today.
Yes, I've been looking forward to this because I love the episodes where you and I get to share what we've experienced, but I really love the ones that we get to talk to people about the work they do at EPL and learn more about, as you say, the different resources and things that are available for people to check out. So I'm really, really looking forward to today.
Yes, we have a couple of great guests joining us today. We also, for the second episode in a row, we have a first time guest joining us. Caroline, we love having our first time guests and introducing EPL staff to listeners. First, I want to welcome to the show for the very first time, digital content coordinator here at EPL, Autumn Schnell. Autumn, how are you today?
I am good. It's a Monday morning, which is nice.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we are recording on a Monday morning. I should mention. So first thing, and great fun way to start the week.
And if we're going to pull the curtain back on that, then I think we should also share that, Bryce, you forgot we were recording today.
I did. It's funny because I was mentioning to Caroline that normally I'm actually really good with like organizing my week, and Friday was super busy and I didn't have a chance to set up my week and log into my computer today. And I'm like, oh yeah, this recording is today. So, I think I did an okay job trying to prepare for this one, but, yeah, I'll try and be on my game. But, Autumn, as digital, content coordinator, can you let our listeners know a little bit about your role?
Yeah. EPL hired me about 6 months ago to work solely with Voices of the Land. So my entire job is working with communities and also with the web development for the platform. Yeah.
Nice. Well, yeah, we're looking forward to learning more about your role, of course, and Voices of the Land. And yeah, we also want to welcome back to the show. She's our Senior Advisor of Indigenous Relations here at EPL, Emily Riddle. Emily, how's it going today?
Pretty good. Yeah, it's Monday morning. I'm feeling revived. I'm headed to Toronto tomorrow, so I have a short work week for the Griffin Poetry Award. So yeah, it's been good morning so far.
The Griffin Poetry Award, which you won.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I just want our listeners to know that you are an award-winning poet.
It's true. Yes, we Autumn and I have our hands in lots of projects in EPL and outside of.
So yeah, I should mention. So correct me if I'm wrong. I believe this is the first ever Griffin Poetry Prize, and it was actually for your debut poetry collection called The Big Melt, right?
It was, yeah. It's the first, I think it's called Canadian First Book Prize, so they've changed the awards a little bit this year, but I won the inaugural award, which is really exciting.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I remember reading about that in our internal staff web. And yeah, I know that just from obviously you being on the show before and some of the stuff that that you do. Have you always written poetry? Is that something maybe you got into in high school or just something that you recently rediscovered?
I really started as a nonfiction writer, but I lived in East Vancouver with a lot of poets. So I was influenced to start writing poetry as kind of a reaction to feeling that there wasn't enough space in journalistic writing or nonfiction to imagine like an Indigenous future that was flourishing. And so I think that definitely like links to the website we're talking about today in terms of providing people space to tell their stories if they don't necessarily have access to publishing, and that could be in different formats as well too.
Yeah, so congratulations. That's an awesome achievement.
Thank you.
Yeah, so before we get chatting all about Voices of the Land, let's get into our recent Overdue finds picks. Emily, we're actually going to start with you today. Do you have a recent pick that you can recommend to listeners?
I have two. So I binged Shiny Happy People this weekend, which is a documentary series about the Duggar family and kind of the teachings, the sect of Christianity that Bill Gothard led. So, and they're kind of like planned to influence the American government and the background about that show in TLC, which was very interesting. So that was kind of my pick. And then because the big award for the Griffin Poetry Prize will be announced on Wednesday night. So I finally read Ocean Vuong's Under the, or what is it? Oh, the actual full title too. On the Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. I've been diving into his novel in anticipation of meeting and sharing space with him.
So sorry, what's that book all about?
It is, so he's a poet. So I really love reading novels from poets just because of the language and kind of cadence of their writing. And it's about like Vietnamese immigrants' experiences in America and immigration and like matriarchs, and is very kind of poetic and experimental, which I like with novels. I don't generally read novels.
I have to quickly ask you to Shiny Happy People. I've read about it. I haven't watched it yet. Where can you check that out?
That one is not on any of our EPL subscriptions. It's on Amazon Prime Video.
Okay.
Yeah. But the book you can definitely find in our collection.
Nice. And Autumn, first time guest, do you have a recommendation for our listeners?
I thought about this for a long time, actually. So in November of 2021, I got a concussion, and I had to stop like reading and like watching everything. I did listen to some audiobooks, but mostly I listened to podcasts because I think that it was just like easier for my brain to absorb. I have recovered since then, but I just like haven't been able to like get into TV or like books really since. I don't know why. I think it's like a brain change, but I have been listening to a podcast called The Psychology of Your 20s. And that one isn't on EPL platforms, but it is a podcast that I have really been enjoying. And then another one is I just got my hands on the audiobook version, but it's Bad Cree by Jessica Johns, an Edmonton-based writer, and in the collection. So I'd recommend that.
Yeah, Caroline, actually wasn't our last episode, but the episode before that, I think you had recommended that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved it. It was just fantastic.
So, Autumn, I also want to ask you to Psychology of Your 20s, is it called, the podcast?
Yeah.
So is it just about kind of living your best life in your 20s, or what's that podcast all about?
So I love psychology. I love knowing about the brain. And this one talks a lot about like just problems and like triumphs that people have in their like early and mid 20s. And I think that it was really impactful for me since I'm in that age category. It's really nice to know. I think that it's not an age group that people talk about very much, but I think that it's a great podcast for me, and just like about like social anxiety or dating or just like growing up or grief, and it like talks on all of those big topics that I really liked.
Oh, it sounds really good.
And I'm really interested in what you just said about your concussion as well, and how that has shaped or changed or continues to, even though you mentioned you've recovered from it. I had a concussion several years ago, and am still processing the ways that I continue to be affected by it, but the ability to watch TV or movies or read a book or have that concentration piece was absolutely one of the challenges that doesn't. I think people are very focused on one's ability to do the core functions of, getting up, getting through the day, getting back to work, and the conversations about like all of the things that make you a whole person aren't always, I think, fully explored in terms of recovery. So, thank you for sharing that today.
Yeah, totally. It's a weird thing where people, like, even doctors are really focused on, like, are you still getting tinnitus? Or, like, are you getting enough sleep? Or, like, just the facts that, like, it takes 10 days to recover from an average concussion, which is true, but also mine took me a year. And it wasn't even, like, a severe concussion. It was just, like, I feel like it was severe for me, but yeah, that was a big thing, weirdly, was, like, I couldn't read or, like, watch movies or, like, even, like, open my eyes. It, like, burned to open my eyes. And I, like, could not get enough rest, which is impactful. I was a student at the time, so it was, like, deeply impactful to my, like, student pursuits.
My overdue find this week is a novel called The Thing in the Snow by Sean Adams. It's one part office satire, one part psychological thriller. That old thing, when it comes to publishing.
That tired trope.
So the Northern Institute, a former premier research facility, now sits empty. Or almost empty. An unspecified incident shut the place down years ago. Now a caretaking team of 3 and a single researcher are the only ones there, and they have strict orders. Complete their weekly tasks to keep the place functioning, never touch the thermostat, and never ever go outside. Then one day, a thing appears in the snow. A thing outside that disrupts everything. They have no idea what it is, where it came from, or what they're going to do about it. As the novel goes on, about 5 pages in, if this is for you or not. When I was looking up reviews, the reviews are either 1 star or 5 star. Like, this is a polarizing book, but I was definitely the audience for it. I would say that it's The Shining meets The Office, sprinkled with Samuel Beckett. So that's my pitch for The Thing in the Snow by Sean Adams.
You got me hooked just with a combination of The Shining and The Office, 2 of my, like, favorite things in pop culture.
So Jack Nicholson is the Shining guy, right?
Yeah.
And so if he's there as a caretaker, but instead of his family, he had like some office coworkers, and maybe one of them is in charge, but they're trying to guard against someone trying to take their promotion. Someone is incredibly literal, so when they have to count things, they get sidetracked into different discussions. Meanwhile, like, there's weird things going on, and debates over if you see, I don't know, 2 little ghost girls, do they count in terms of the inventory that they've been tasked to do that week? So, like, that type of thing.
Gotcha. So I have to ask, have you seen the movie, like the John Carpenter movie, The Thing?
Yes.
Okay, so is it very similar to that? Because, like, when you're talking about them kind of being in the, like, this Arctic outpost and everything, that's kind of definitely got some Thing vibes from that one.
yeah, you think it's Arctic, and then it comes out that they don't actually really know where they're located, and the sun starts doing some weird things, and actually gravity might be coming in and out as well. So it's not really fully spelled out, but yes, very The Thing-like setting.
Well, you have me intrigued on that one, Caroline. So I'm gonna have to put a hold on for that one.
Good. What's your overdue find this week?
Yeah. So recently, there's, I've mentioned on the show before, I'm a big fan of horror movies and everything. And one movie I've always wanted to watch, but I've never seen it on any streaming services anywhere. And realized that a few months ago, we have it in our catalog on DVD. And that's the 1990 horror film, Jacob's Ladder. So the film actually stars Tim Robbins. This is like early Tim Robbins, I should say, like kind of like I don't know if he was like necessarily a big star in 1990, but you can tell he's getting there anyway. So Tim Robbins plays a Vietnam War veteran in this movie with PTSD, and he's mourning the death of his child, who I should also mention is played by a pre-Home Alone Macaulay Culkin. So while he tries to kind of put together some pieces from his past, he ends up actually being haunted by his dreams. He has delusions of demons and perceptions of death all around him. So fans of the Silent Hill video games will enjoy this movie because this movie actually plays a pretty big role in those games anyway. So this is a movie also too, like, I don't want to give too much away about the plot. This is one that's kind of like visceral, and it's just very creepy, and it will stay with you. I just actually watched it yesterday afternoon, and I can't get this one out of my head. So go check out Jacob's Ladder if you're looking for something maybe a little different and definitely a little creepy. All right. So today, of course, we are chatting all about Voices of the Land. I gave a very brief description of it at the top of the show, but I know I didn't really do it justice. So, Emily, I guess, what is Voices of the Land, and can you share maybe some of its history and what people can find there?
Definitely. So Voices of the Land started off as Voices of Amisquitchee, which was created with a Canada 150 grant and launched by EPL in 2017. So prior to Autumn and I joining the organization. So it was really celebrated or pushed forward by Rocky Mann, who's not joining us today, who's one of our collaborators, who's a digital initiatives librarian. So it was a collaboration. We met with a lot of community, EPL met with a lot of community to determine like what would it look like for us to have a Indigenous digital storytelling space. And we decided on a platform called Overdue, which is a free open source content management platform developed by Australian Aboriginal tribes in collaboration with librarians there. So it is really meant to mirror on-the-ground processes for sharing information that Indigenous peoples may have. So we created a website called Voices of Amisquitchee that was launched in 2017 with Yellow Pencil, a dev company here in Edmonton that used Mukudu. And so there was a lot of interest, and we realized that stories were not limited to the Edmonton area. Amisquitchee is a reference, a Cree name that we have for like the larger Edmonton area, including Sherwood Park and those areas. It actually references like the ecosystem around. A Beaver Hills reference is what it means. So we were meeting with libraries around the province and other Indigenous communities around the province, and we realized that stories weren't limited to the Edmonton area. And so we worked over the pandemic to expand the site to Voices of the Land. So it's an Alberta-wide platform that is funded by the provincial government through the Public Library Services branch. And we worked with the steering committee of libraries throughout the province and met with community as much as we could over the pandemic online. So we're sending protocol in the mail, meeting with elders via Zoom, things like that, to expand it. So that's Voices of the Land, which is a digital storytelling website that can sponsor or have very many different kinds of media like video, text, audio, all those sorts of things. So that is Voices of the Land in a nutshell.
So, Autumn, your role, I know you mentioned at the top of the show that obviously you work on this project. What does that look like for you? Is this solely kind of what you work on, or do you collect all the stories? How does that work?
So my position is a really, really interesting position because it's the first of its kind. And I don't think EPL has a lot of positions like that. Like, libraries have existed for a long time. EPL just celebrated a 100-year birthday. So a lot of positions have been around, like a collections librarian has changed and has adapted, but has been around for a long time. My position was brand new. So it was, when I first started, it was a lot of figuring out like what I should do and what would be best to have me do. And we've kind of settled on something. So part of the public funded grant is we need to create we called it a site guide, but essentially they're training videos and just training modules. And so that is what we've kind of settled on me doing right now. And with the training modules, we have a public facing one right now on the site, which is just called the site guide. If you go to Voices of the Land, I think it's voicesoftheland.org. The site guide will be there. And that's what I've been working on, but we're kind of also at a place where we want to focus more on community work for the platform, internal and external community work. So that's kind of what we're working towards. But when we do that, Emily brought up Voices of Amiskwichi, and that is, I think that would be mostly within that job, because Voices of the Land and Voices of Amiskwichi are kind of separate. It's a bit hard to describe. So Voices of the Land is the main platform, and then Voices of Amiskwichi is a community within the platform, but it used to be the whole platform pre-expansion. So now we want to do more work with Indigenous communities in Edmonton, but also within EPL for Voices of Amiskwichi. And then we also want to keep developing the provincial expansion. So it's kind of both, but I haven't been working with content as much. I love working with content. I also used to be a podcast producer, and I've worked with within journalism and media in the past too. So yeah, that is something that I think would be really, really impactful, but it's just not something that we quite have the capacity to do yet. But yeah, so it's kind of a long-winded question. The short answer is mostly the site guide.
Nice. I'm feeling a little nervous now with a professional podcast producer on with us today, Caroline.
This is good. We need this to keep us on our toes.
Yeah.
What's been the response as you've kind of gone beyond the Voices of Amiskwichi to the larger one that includes more of Alberta? What's been the response of the expansion?
I can go. So there's we've had really positive. People are very excited about having a website where, just for example, when we talk about Indigenous protocols in the space, if folks want to share content on the website and not have it be public, they can do that. They can limit audiences, so they could create a community, which is a page on the website, and then have a protocol, for example, that would be elders only. So they could invite only elders to that protocol to view things. They can put stories away. So there's, in some cultures, we only tell certain stories during certain seasons. So it could be made public only during those certain seasons. We could have youth-only protocols, things like that. So the idea is really to mirror the way that Indigenous people share our data on an online space, which is really innovative and interesting. So when we think about libraries, we often think about access to information being a right of people, and open access being one of our values. But for example, I'm Cree. For us, Cree people have the right to all of our cultural knowledge that exists, but there are processes in which you have to learn it, which might involve, for example, approaching an elder with protocol. So even our CEO, Pilar Martinez, when she asked our elder in residence to sign another contract to be elder in residence for another term, I got supply chain management to buy a buffalo robe and a carton of cigarettes. So that was the process the Pilar had to present in a hockey bag as part of that. So thinking through those cultural processes, like both in library spaces and also online spaces, because increasingly libraries are online. So being able, I think community members are really excited about being able to do that, but we have heard that communities need more resources. So one of the collaborations we're working on is with the Edmonton Heritage Council. So we're hosting an indigitization workshop in September, which we're really excited about. There's the UBC Library School has an indigitization program that they work with First Nations and Indigenous organizations in BC, where they provide grants to community to digitize their records. And we knew through visiting communities for the expansion of the website, like for example, the Samson Cree Nation, the Musqueam's archives have around 23,000 cassettes that they need to digitize. So if there was a fire in the community or a flood, all of those records of cultural things, people, records that people use for court cases, those would all be lost. So we're hosting a workshop in the fall with Edmonton Heritage Council to bring a bunch of folks to Edmonton to learn how to digitize things. And if they would like to put them on the website, we think that's awesome. I think there was a big emphasis on the previous site of creating like new and shiny videos, but our phones are really good at recording audio now. You can create things like that too. You can shoot in 4K on the new iPhone. So right now it's really about providing resources to community, which they've asked for creating new content and also digitizing old content as well. So that's kind of our focus of the summer, is visiting people and getting to know what they need to add things to the site too.
Did you say Pilar delivered the protocol in a hockey bag?
Yeah, the best way to transport a buffalo robe, because they're quite heavy, is a hockey bag. So in our space downstairs in Payasiwaskegan, we have a buffalo robe we use for pipe ceremonies here. And yeah, he's in a hockey bag. So
Oh.
It's funny too, because Emily has to take it for a walk sometimes downtown, like in the hockey bag, a little bit open, so that way it can.
You're supposed to take them outside sometimes.
Wow.
I'll say, to add on to Emily's too, I've noticed a need for this. Like, there needs to be spaces where people can share their content or hide their content in a safe way, and that's within Amiskwichiwaskagan. It's within Alberta, but it's also nationally and internationally. Like, there aren't many spaces that I can think of that are safer places to store data. I mean, nowhere online is going to be 100% safe, but like EPL doesn't own the content on the site, and that's pretty atypical for a lot of websites. So I was even up north a little while ago talking to people who are working with elders near Sambake, and they were saying that the elders like have a bunch of videos that they've made, but they don't know where to put them, and they're thinking about making their own website. And I was like, you should just use Voices of the Land. You can even use it as like a storage place. Like, it doesn't have to be public. It can just be a storage point. And that's also a successful application of the website. So
you mentioned some of the opportunities and challenges of having a digital space. Are there more, like, the fact that this is digital, what opportunities has that created, and what challenges has that maybe caused as well?
I think there's a lot of mistrust of Indigenous people have some mistrust of digital spaces and of institutions. So it has been a really good relationship building exercise, because there's some things that we don't share online, or have very strict protocols around sharing. So I have some songs on my phone or my personal computer that are ceremony songs that I'm learning, but and I've only been given those with trust of those elders. So there's some things that may never get posted on the site. So I think there's some mistrust that the library will try and own them. But as Autumn said, those things are completely owned by the individual, and they can remove them at any point. And we're actually able to pull all the metadata off the site, all those tags and everything, and fully give it back to folks and not have it on the site if they would like. So I think that's one of the challenge. And then I think digital literacy, so as well, like we have lots of folks with things they'd like to post on the site, but who may need additional assistance in actually posting it. So that was part of the point of Autumn making the site guide, was so folks would have a really detailed guide about the site, and the vision of the project, but also just practically how to post things, which was really important. So those are kind of two things I can think of that have been challenging. I don't know if Autumn has other additional things as someone who works a lot in digital spaces.
Yeah, Emily covered my exact 2 points. I think the digital literacy one is something that could be addressed in a lot of different ways, but I think that that's something that we're working on too. Like, I think that's why we want a more, like, a larger emphasis on community work, is because with development and relationship building, digital literacy can come from that. But I think that in a lot of like non-Indigenous spaces, digital literacy, there's like a baseline that's assumed that can't be assumed within like our own communities. And part of that's because of the like mistrust of data, but also part of it's just like internet connectivity issues, the lack of power even in communities, and just like an unfamiliarity with it. Like, I'm from up north. I'm Gwich'in from Tetlejay, and up there we have a lot of land literacy, and there's a lot of land literacy here too, but like it's different up there. Like, there's a lot of land literacy, but I think a lot of people like think that that is less important than digital literacy, but I feel like a lot of times they go hand in hand, and they're equally important. But yeah, so like it's interesting doing work up north because like people don't know how to like sign things digitally yet, and that's something that like generally here you can just assume that if you email somebody a form, they will send it back to you pretty quickly because that's common. But up north, that's not the case. Like, even if I'm interviewing people, I will print out documents and get them to sign it, and then I will scan it myself, or we can just do like audio consent. So it's interesting, like things like that, and also how like Enoch is going to have a different level of like digital literacy than communities up north. So yeah, that's something that I'm really passionate about. I love Indigenous digital literacy, and the ways that it's different, and how we can't all like cover it in one, like there can't just be like one level of understanding or like attempt for it. But even like within urban communities, the level of literacy is so different. Like in Edmonton.
Yeah, that sounds like it must be such a rewarding experience for the both of you to be working kind of on a project like this, where you are able to work with different groups, and like you said, maybe the digital literacy isn't there, but obviously it sounds like you're helping them kind of go through these steps, and especially too, Emily, like you touched on with, making sure that, not everybody can access certain stories or songs or whatever that is.
Yeah, I think it is super rewarding to see people, like, I think just being people feeling seen, and being able to share their stories. You may not think that they feel like their life story or aspects of that or talents that they have are important, or that people might be interested in them. So I think that part is also very gratifying.
So when we actually started talking about doing this episode together, one of the things that you had mentioned in an email, Emily, was Indigenous data sovereignty. I guess when I saw that, I wasn't sure what it is, but can you maybe explain a little bit more what that is and how it applies to Voices of the Land?
Definitely, yeah, and I invite Autumn at the end to add anything that they might have to add. Indigenous data sovereignty is a term that's really come out of academic literature, including in libraries over the last 10 to 15 years. But it really references principles that Indigenous people have always had. So if you think about Indigenous people on this continent prior to colonization were managing data and managing land, and had knowledge about how to do things on the land, knowledge about each other, songs, and all these things are actually data. If you think about it, in a relational way, all those things are all data. So we had processes of managing data before, like our own kind of libraries, for lack of a better word, as well. So Indigenous data sovereignty is really thinking back to what are the principles that each individual Indigenous nation, so it'd be different for me versus Autumn, how our cultures might want to share data. How do we honor those processes and principles of how Indigenous people would like to share data? And so Indigenous data has also been continuously violated for folks. If you think about the experiments done on children in residential schools and data collected, health data from Indigenous communities not necessarily being shared with First Nations. So we know there's been a lot of data collected on us as well as part of this like colonization project, which is ongoing. So it's really about us having access to that data and being able to share it in ways that make sense to us and for our benefit. So we're trying to mirror that in this project. And we really were looking at principles of OCAP. So there's OCAP training, which we encourage folks to take, which is about ownership, control, access, and possession. Which is the First Nations Data Institute runs those trainings, and thinking through those 4 principles in relation to kind of any data that we'd have on the website as well. Which is one of the most common questions we get with community is, where are your servers based? Are they subject to US data laws? And they're Canadian-based servers. So that's actually probably the most common question we get when we meet with either community or library professionals, or intersections of both of those. So I don't know if Autumn has anything to add.
Emily covered it incredibly well. I think the only thing of confusion for a lot of people is OCAP is also fairly research-based, but I think that, as Emily explained, it can also be applied in like everyday, day-to-day life. So like data isn't just like numbers or like analytical figures. It's like also just like metadata on websites, but it's also like knowing things about the land and like archives that way too, which Emily did cover, but I think that people can get confused with that. But that's why we wanted this website to be more than just like numeric based. So like we don't actually look at the amount of stories that are put on the website. I also think that like community work is just as valuable for it, because having communities just like aware that this is here and like can be utilized at any point feels just as valuable, if not more valuable, than like X community shared 7 stories. So yeah, Emily did a great job summarizing data sovereignty.
Or the point earlier you made about using it as storage, or the backup, or the place where it can be located and kept, but maybe not necessarily made public even within some of the protocol pieces. So, that's something that I can, having worked in libraries, I can see there being maybe a pushback at times around but how will we know that we're successful around some of the more used markers of quote unquote success of something. So being able to set the markers for this project is a really interesting thing to be doing.
Yeah, definitely very community-led project in that. And a lot of Indigenous services we do with EPL, we do measure metrics, but it's also about relationships that we build and also maintain over a period of time too. So yeah, as Autumn's saying, it might be like elders putting their things on the website and it not being public, but often those relationships result in other things as well too. So yeah, different, might not be the number of videos on the site, but rather the kind of relationships or projects that come out of it. For example, the Lethbridge Public Library has a number of videos they did with residential school survivors last September, which are posted, that are super beautiful, and like just the community work and value that comes to the community, and being able to reference those things and have them forever as well too.
Speaking of forever, what do you hope to see in the future for Voices of the Land? Autumn, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I hope to see like a lot more community work, because I think that EPL does have a really large focus on community work. But I think that during the pandemic, inevitably, like it was just like so hard for communities to even get together or to gather or to maintain levels of community involvement. And so that's something that I really want to revamp. We haven't really done many bigger events since COVID. Like we've had to do some of smaller events, like we did a Atlanta Whiskey Jack event, and we did like a podcast event in March. But I really want to see just like community work. I would love to see like community story sharing circles, or like working on content creation and content development as a community too. So like having this be community based, but also like creating community with it too, I think would be really lovely to see. And also something that I think is pretty reasonable with community partnerships or even internally. I think that's like the biggest thing. And also just like working with elders too. Like I think that elders have been a demographic that have particularly struggled with the pandemic, because they're at risk, but also it's hard for relationship building. So I think that that's something that I would love to see in the future. And that's something also that Emily's just great at. Emily is so good at that. So I guess I'll pass that on to Emily.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see, like, we're working on, Autumn's working on some content creation resources. So just being able to support community in creating content. As I said before, there was a huge emphasis on doing video with Voices of Emma Squidgy, which is the most labor-intensive form of media to do, to make a shiny edited video. I mean, audio editing is also quite laborious as well. I know as you all do it. I do not do that very often. Autumn did most of the editing on our site guide that we recorded in our studios here, which is exciting. But being able to even just share a song or a story and not edit that and write a little blurb and put it on the site, or we have some photo essays, things like that. So providing community with resources to share those things on the site and feel like it's a mutually beneficial kind of relationship, rather than and provide, like, being able to provide resources to them to do that work, rather than just saying, please put it on our site. Which is not really our site. We're hoping that it's like the community site. We're also revamping our steering committee with the province. So trying to figure out what exactly our mandate is with all the other libraries around the province and how they would like to participate. So we've done some planning sessions, but are hoping to revamp that in the fall so that we're all meeting together and kind of all maintaining things such as the list of tags or all the metadata on the back end, which is what librarians also quite often ask us about, the tags on the site and how those are maintained, things like that. So really making sure that we have a solid basis with community in Edmonton, and we're doing a lot of visiting this summer, but also hoping to support more rural communities that the other library systems in Alberta provide library service to, which is exciting. We also have a growing number of on-reserve and on-settlement libraries in Alberta. So the provincial government has been funding those. I'm not going to say how many years because I'm going to be incorrect. I'm not sure exactly at this point, but there is a new one in Frog Lake. There's one in Fishing Lake, and there's one in Samson Cree Nation, are the three so far, and a number that are being planned too, which is really exciting. I went to the Ontario Library Association conference in February, and Ontario has been funding on-reserve libraries for quite a bit longer. So there's a lot of on-reserve libraries in that province, but ensuring that digital storytelling is part of their library service too, and that they're at the table is really important too, as Indigenous communities providing direct service to those folks too. So and our digitization, I'm really excited to see. We've actually had a lot of people, we thought that we'd have to do a lot of outreach with that, but we have a lot of communities coming to us looking for those resources at this point. So yeah, we have our really beautiful polished site that we met with community to build, but kind of building out a plan for that community engagement is really exciting at this point.
That's it's such a great project that we have here, and it's definitely it's great to learn more about it, and I'm sure our listeners will definitely enjoy going to the site and learning more about it. So before we get into our quick roundtable questions, Caroline,
yes,
can you let listeners know what we'll be chatting about on our next episode, which will be out on Friday, July the 14th?
Bryce, the only thing better than best of the year lists is our best of the mid-year list. There's always so much to talk about: music, movies, books, games, and more. Join us as we talk about all of our favorite titles and the best of 2023 so far.
Love it. Normally I do that part, but you nailed it today, Caroline.
Thank
Great
you.
job.
I was channeling you. I was thinking, like, how would Bryce do this? And I just did it. So Autumn and Emily, you narrate a series of site map videos on the Voices of the Land site. That got me thinking about narration. Who is one of your favorite pop culture narrators, or your favorite narrator performance? Emily, I'll start with you.
What came to mind when I think it was Morgan Freeman as a narrator. I wish that Morgan Freeman was narrating our site guide. He would have been much better than us.
You did a great job. I really enjoyed them.
Thank you. Yeah, I did. I did voice acting on one podcast or one like radio play is my one voice acting credit. But I've got allergies right now, so I don't think I have the best voice performance on this particular podcast. But yeah, Morgan Freeman is my person. What about you, Autumn?
I really struggled with this question. Also because I don't listen to narration very much. I thought of two people. One was actually Emily and Jess when they did their voice acting for D&D. And the second was the Harry Styles book that he narrated himself.
Sure, yeah.
I haven't listened to much of it. I did rent it from the library and then I got too busy to listen, but I struggled with this question.
Yeah, Autumn is referencing Jessica Johns, actually. So if you liked Bad Cree, she wrote a radio play. There's one episode out called Cree&D. So if you play D&D and like her book, it's kind of an intersection of those. And I play a character in that radio play. So if you search Cree&D on kind of any podcast, you'll come up with the first episode, which is pretty funny.
I was trying some of my roundtable questions are more successful than others. I do go back to the well a lot of if you could go on a road trip with anyone, some variation of that as well. But I couldn't quite figure out how to fit in a road trip part to Voices of the Land. But Bryce, who's your narration?
This was also a tough one for me. I actually went with Sam Elliott. So he's obviously has a very distinct voice and everything. And occasionally you'll hear him narrate truck ads and everything. But, I think of movies like The Big Lebowski where he's in that and kind of narrates certain parts. So, Sam Elliott for me is one of my favorites. Caroline, how about you?
I went with Brenda Strong, who played Mary Alice, the narrator on Desperate Housewives. The actress was also, of course, on Seinfeld, and she just has this brilliant ability to take something and it's very sweet and good, and then all of a sudden we're talking about murder. And just the way that she can play with that inflection. I like that. Okay, second roundtable question. This episode is coming out on June 30th, just as schools are letting out for the summer. Growing up, what was one of your favorite things to do while on summer vacation? Autumn, I'll start with you.
Get Slurpees and play at the park. I actually did that yesterday. Except I went to the garden, which is like my adult park, and I got a Slurpee, and it was fantastic, and I would recommend it to everybody.
Perfect. Love it. Emily?
I would love pools. I still love pools as an adult, so it would either be go to the pool with my cousins or go to the spray park. You can't really go to the spray park as an adult unless you have a kid to bring along with you. But the pool, you definitely can.
There should be, like,
adult ones.
I was just going to say, we might have to work on some of the messaging, but, you show up and it's there and it's 18 plus for the spray park. Yeah. So
totally.
All right. Add that to the Overdue Finds Good Idea pile. Bryce?
Very similar to Autumn, actually. She gave me the great idea of Slurpee runs. I actually went on a Slurpee run yesterday as well, Autumn. So, tip my hat to you on that one. But also, too, just going on bike rides with friends. Growing up in Medicine Hat, we've got kind of the coolies there. And I just remember lots of times getting on the bike and going on these off-beaten paths down in the coolies and exploring with our Slurpees. That was always a great time.
Confession, I also had a Slurpee yesterday, so,
Emily, did you have a Slurpee yesterday? I don't think you did.
No, I didn't.
No. But my answer is very similar to Emily's. I love going swimming, so, swimming and then spending the rest of the day reading, that's the perfect summer day for me. Thank you both so much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed learning more about Voices of the Land. Is there anything coming up at EPL that you would like listeners to know about? Autumn?
I don't know. I just got back from a few weeks off. So I've been just getting back into it. But I I don't know. I can't think of anything right now. Emily?
All the things I can think of right now are going to happen before this episode airs, so I won't tease customers or folks with that. I'm always really passionate about urban Indigenous people or other folks who are interested in attending ceremony and learning about that, to make sure to look at the Elder in Residence page on our EPL website. So if you're interested in getting to learn more about ceremony, attending pipe ceremonies and things like that, definitely pay attention to that site. That's what and also just with the website, I think we really emphasize folks like creating content, but if you just want to browse around, is another site with a lot of cool videos and audio and do some learning about where you live and the Indigenous people here and the land here. I think that's an awesome resource too. So
that's a great idea. I'm going to change my answer and I'm going to say browse the site guide. That's free and available all the time. And we made it.
Great. Well, we'll have a link to that in our notes, and we'll also have a link to Emily's book so that you can check that out as well. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Make sure that you're subscribed to the show so that you get all of our new episodes. Please also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We love reviews. And most importantly, tell a friend about the show.
Yeah, and as Caroline mentioned, we will have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes. So please go check out Voices of the Land. And of course, we love to hear from our listeners. So you can email us at podcast@epl.ca. Caroline and I both get those emails, and we love hearing from you. You can also share your thoughts about the show with us on Twitter by tweeting at the EPL's Twitter account at epl.ca and by using the hashtag EPL Overdue Finds. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.